Morning guys, welcome to the channel. This is my 2022 Boxing Awards. Just my opinion on who deserves what this year in boxing. First up, we've got the Fighter of the Year. To me, there's only a couple of people in this race for Fighter of the Year, but one edged it over the other. The runner-up for me is Dimitri Bivol. He's had two impressive wins. You could make arguments that he should be beating the likes of Alvarez, who was well outside of his division, which was a good win, but Canelo is a much smaller man. And then Gilberto Ramirez had quite a built-up record and found his level when he faced Bivol, but nonetheless they're two very impressive wins this year for him. But that does not top what Jesse Bam Rodriguez has done this year. Moving up from £108, two weight divisions, and beating Quadras, and then being an absolute badass rather than going back down or fighting a nobody. He fights another top guy in the division, who's had some great wins, to be honest, in his career. Beating the likes of Chocolatito, etc. And Rodriguez stops Saur Rungvisai. He's just showing what level he's at. And to me, that is a clear winner for Fighter of the Year, in this year at least, anyway. Knockout of the Year. Now, this is a tough one. We had a few good knockouts this year, but what topped it for me is the emphatic demolition job, pretty much, what Inoue done on Nonito Donaire in their rematch after the first fight, which was a very close. It was a bit of a war. It's a very good fight, and it was quite close. And I think Donaire was hurt a few times in it, as well as Inoue. And it was a really good fight, the first one. But the second fight was a demolition job and a brilliant knockout in the second round. For me, even going back at the start of the year, I think that the fight was in February, but it's not been topped so far this year. Honourable mention for second place, I would have to go with Leigh Wood's unbelievable last round KO on Michael Conlan to win a fight which he was losing. Those are my two shouts. But Nonito Donaire, for me, just a beautiful sequence of punches. Sharp, fast, brilliant KO. Fight of the Year. As I mentioned previously, for Knockout of the Year, this was an honourable mention, but I do believe it deserves Fight of the Year. It's Leigh Wood versus Michael Conlan. Brilliant fight. If you haven't seen it, go watch it back. Close fought, competitive fight, albeit Michael Conlan seemed to be winning the majority of the rounds. Leigh Wood come on strong in the second half of the fight. It was all action, and it led to a movie script finish. 12th round KO from Leigh Wood, knocking Michael Conlan out the ring. Referee decided the fight would not continue, and Leigh Wood was victorious. Brilliant fight, well deserved for Fight of the Year in my opinion. Close runner-up, a female fight, Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. Again, all action. For me, I couldn't give it Fight of the Year. It was, given the drama in the other fight, I had to lean it towards Leigh Wood, Michael Conlan. But again, great action fight. Obviously, in the female sport, the rounds are shorter and there's less of them, being 10 2-minute rounds, which sometimes leads to more action, I suppose, in a lot shorter amount of time. So, but that was all action. I believe Katie Taylor was hurt in it as well, which you don't see very often. And it could have gone either way, and perhaps Katie Taylor was a bit lucky to even get the decision. But I would like to see that one again. But for me, Leeward, Michael Conlan takes it. Prospect of the year. I'm fully aware that as things stand, this guy hasn't really fought anyone of note. But on the eye test, and I know I'm probably UK biased with some of these picks, but on the eye test, I haven't seen a prospect more exciting in recent years than Adam Azim. The way he's going through these fighters, the speed he's throwing the punches, it's all highlight reel knockouts, and he proved that again in his latest fight against a good, solid English domestic level guy in Rylan Charlton. It wasn't a competitive contest in any shape or form. I believe he needs to step up to British level, and he might even be well past that level already at this stage in his career, but he's got a very bright future ahead of him. Very exciting fighter to watch, and Sky have got a good prospect on their hands there, who's going to be in some exciting fights. I want to see his chin get checked, because if he's got a decent chin, the kid's probably going right the way up to world level, and will be in some big fights in the future. That is my prospect of the year, Adam Azim. Trainer of the year. There's probably a few good shouts on this. I've tried not to be biased towards British trainers, but you could throw in maybe your Shane McGuigan or someone like that. But for me, having thought about it, I think Robert Garcia deserves it. He's got the fighter of the year on my list, and he's had him from a young age, and to me that speaks volumes for his capabilities of training, because this guy has been brought up in his gym to develop the skills that he's got, taking apart these long-standing former or current world champions with the ease that he's done, proves the level of which the trainer has, taught him. It proves to me the level of the gym and the level of the trainer when you've got fighters like that coming out of his gym. Plus, don't forget, even though Anthony Joshua was unsuccessful in his rematch against Alexander Usyk this year, he did have Robert Garcia in his corner, and to me it looked like one of the best versions of Anthony Joshua we've seen for a very long time. So I believe that he had a good impact on Joshua as well in that fight, and it's a shame that they're not working together, to be honest, still. But Robert Garcia gets trainer of the year for me. Promoter of the year. In the UK, a new promoter has emerged, given the circumstances around Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing leaving their broadcaster, Sky Sports, and going over to DAZN. A new figure emerged in boxing called Ben Shalom. To me, he's had an exceptional year, making some big fights that have been hovering around for a long while behind the scenes, like Kell Brook, Amir Khan, not to mention other fights. And albeit he's not had every night be a blockbuster, he has produced a lot of cards over here where there's always one or two fights on there And sometimes 3 or 4 fights on there that you do want to watch, albeit at lower levels. They've got backstories behind them. And it was behind the all-female card at the O2, which was very good and very well built. And he's one to look out for in the future. He's definitely on the rise, and his stable's still being built, but you're starting to get some interesting fights out there to be made within his stable. And he's got, to me, the best stable of young fighters in the sport, including a lot of the Olympians signed over with him. And I think there's going to be some exceptional cards in the pipeline coming from Boxer and Ben Shalom on Sky in 2023. I see some big fights out there to be made, and I think the only UK-based promoter that was rivaling him to some extent this year was Eddie Hearn, but off the back of some of the controversial situations that Eddie Hearn got himself into this year, I believe his stock has fallen dramatically, coming off of the Conor Benn failed doping test and the fact that the fight was even going to go ahead was a massive negative for me looking from an outsider at Matchroom Boxing. And the current situation he's in with Lawrence Okolie doesn't seem like it's doing their company any favours in terms of their image. Ben Shalom seems to work okay and want to work okay, including with Matchroom, albeit Frank Smith rather than Eddie Hearn. And, you know, he's young, he's ambitious, and the sport just ain't made him bitter yet, but there's signs of Eddie Hearn getting a bit bitter. So that is my promoter of the year. Robbery of the year. To me, I can't even believe that it was still this year, because it seems like years ago now. Maybe because both guys have sort of disappeared off social media and not posted anything and not been relevant, not been in other fights, and even been stripped of multiple titles. But the robbery of the year, believe it or not, this fight was still this year, has to be Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall. One of the most bizarre robberies I've ever seen in the whole time I've watched boxing. You know, to me, a clear winner by a few rounds. Jack Catterall should have been crowned world champion, undisputed world champion, which he will never get the opportunity probably to fight for in his career. Everything clicked on the night, and he should have got a decision, but he was robbed by the judges on that night. Now, since then, Josh Taylor has been stripped of 3 of his world titles, and apparently the rematch is going to happen. And I think if you look back at the odds at the time, Jack Catterall was a massive underdog going into that fight, and I'd like to see the odds for the rematch. I think Josh Taylor will still be made a favourite, but they're going to be a lot tighter after the performance that Jack put on. Should have been world champion. Still can't believe it was only in February or whenever it was this year. Seems like an age ago. But that's my robbery of the year. Boxing channel of the year. One boxing channel has sort of emerged this year, albeit there's some really good podcasts that I like listening to. Some funny guys like the Undefeated podcast and stuff like that. But for me, from a boxing channel, one stands out as leading in front of the pack, and that's ID Boxing, Shout out to ID Boxing, Rob Tebbett. Absolutely brilliant content. Rob, who was former Boxing Social. I'm not sure what happened there, but he left there and he started his own company. And to be honest, they're head and shoulders above most people that are doing similar things on YouTube. And their podcast is exceptional, where they have a sit down. It's normally Barry Jones or Deck Taylor or someone on there with Rob, and you know, their content that they've done, even the WBC convention they've done, and you know, their journalism around the breaking news when the fight fell through with Conor Benn, and they had what I hadn't really seen done before, but an on-scene reporter seemingly going live, trying to find out what was going on behind the scenes. I thought that's exceptional, and they've stood out. The quality of their videos, the editing put into them, to me stands out above any boxing channel this year, and really any boxing channel I've seen so far. But yeah, brilliant channel. Those were my awards for 2022 boxing related stuff. Have a good Christmas, guys, and I look forward to some big fights happening in 2023.